I never imagined that the Swill Milk Scandal of the 1850s would be a relevant and cautionary tale in 2025, but here we are in Trump's America. If you don't know what the Swill Milk Scandal is, I'll get into it in just a second, but here's why it's so important. Yesterday, the Food and Drug Administration announced that it was going to be suspending milk quality tests. Nothing says government efficiency, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, like cutting necessary workers from our Food and Drug Administration and the USDA. They have now cut the FDA staff so severely that they cannot carry out milk safety laboratory tests. What part of cutting necessary food safety programs is cutting waste? Necessary programs that protect the health and lives of Americans is not waste. This comes after other cuts from the FDA where they're no longer going to be testing for bird flu in milk, even though we know that bird flu is endemic in the cow population in the US. They're also going to stop checking for other pathogens in other food products. They've also stopped their proficiency testing for raw milk and cheese and other dairy products. The certification and inspection process that allows you to sell raw dairy is quite rigorous because the risks are very high. Listeria, E. coli, salmonella contamination, those kill people. Public policy around food safety was bought and paid for in blood. The reason that we have these laws, that we have these policies around food inspection is because people died before they were in place. This is a necessary function of government to keep the populace safe from foodborne illness, but also adulteration of food. Did y'all not have to read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair in junior high? Nobody? Consumer protection laws are there because corporations, they're not moral, they're not just, they're not ethical. They will sell you unsafe products if it increases their profit margin. They will cut corners on food safety if it increases their profit margin. Y'all wonder why I'm an anti-capitalist. People will sell you and your children toxic, poisonous shit if it makes them a buck. The government is there to protect your safety, your health, your life. Food safety laws, those policies, those inspections, those protections, they're there to protect your health and your life. Businesses that would scam you, businesses that would have no problem making you sick, making your babies sick if it increased their profit margin. So of course, under the Trump regime, they want to do away with all kinds of regulation and policy that's meant to protect consumers because they want to maximize the profit for corporations. They don't care about you and your health. They don't care about your children's health. They are perfectly happy to sacrifice your well-being on the altar of corporate profit. That's why these cuts are coming through. Our taxpayer dollars should absolutely be funding food inspection and food safety. It is nonsensical to cut these programs. Which brings me to the Swill Milk Scandal of the 1850s. It's a nice little window into the risk you were taking with your life and your children's lives every time you went and bought food in America before we had these safety laws. In the mid-19th century, we saw a population boom in cities on the East Coast, particularly New York. At that same time, there was a hay shortage and also a tremendous amount of pollution and contamination in the water. It really wasn't safe for children to just drink water. Adults, neither, which is why they drank a lot of alcohol in that time period. One of the reasons why. So cow milk was pushed very heavily as a safer drink for children, lower risk of pathogens. Industrial Revolution and a wave of immigrants, we saw a lot of women in the workplace, and that meant that they had to supplement their own breast milk, and so that further increased the demand for cow milk. Any situation where there is a high consumer demand and a shortage of product, you're going to see unethical people step in who hope to exploit the situation and make a big fat profit. Because of this hay shortage and the high consumption of alcohol at the time, those in the New York City area were being fed the mash from distilleries. This was a nutritionally inferior product. It resulted in very sick cows who, like the illustration here, literally had to be strung up because they were too sick to stand. I'm going to reference a piece from Big Think from 2023. Cows were fed a leftover mash from Manhattan and Brooklyn distilleries. Capitalism is trying to do a capitalism here. Distillers said, oh, we can make money selling our spent grain. We're going to take advantage of this hay shortage and the high demand for milk. Again, spent distillers mash is nutritionally incomplete for cows. They were getting very sick off of it. But at the time, distillers and people who were producing swill milk were claiming that it was a superior food and that cows fed that mash were producing 5 to 25 times as much milk as cows that were fed hay or were on pasture. Obviously, these claims are completely false. These were downer cows covered in sores, often infected with tuberculosis and God knows what else, living in horrible conditions, completely unsanitary conditions, inhumane conditions. It was a diet solely consisting of swill that proved particularly damaging to the cows. When introduced to the boiling liquid, that's the leftover spent mash, cows typically refused to eat for a few days until desperation drove them to consume the slop. A diet consisting exclusively of the swill made cows sick, led to ulcerated sores all over their bodies, and caused their tails to fall off. Resulting liquid, you can hardly call it milk, was thin and had an unnatural bluish tint. Moms going to buy the milk could see it did not look like normal milk. It also didn't smell good. And obviously they didn't want to buy it and feed it to their babies. They're like, this looks sus. This smells not great. Because there were no protection laws for consumers back then. These shady swill milk producers just added a bunch of shit to the milk to make it look more like cow's milk when cows were fed on pasture. They added chalk, plaster of Paris, eggs, flour, other adulterants to get the right color and consistency. Also added formaldehyde to deal with the fact that the milk was spoiled. As a result of these adulterants like plaster of Paris and formaldehyde being added to the milk, as a result of the high bacteria count in the milk from these cows that were suffering and very ill, 8,000 babies in New York City died in 1 year. At first, they couldn't figure out why these kids were dying. They initially thought maybe this is an outbreak of cholera, proved not to be that. And after extensive investigation, they found out that the source was this swill milk. Now, food adulteration was not something new in the Victorian era. It happened frequently because there were no laws protecting consumers. You put your life on the line, your children's lives on the line every time you went to go buy something because of corporate greed, because of businesses that wanted to make a profit, risking your health and your life. Consumer protection laws and policy, food inspection was bought and paid for in blood. FDA milk inspection was bought and paid for with the lives of 8,000 little children. And now the Trump regime wants to pull that back. Adulterating food and killing people by doing so was pretty common in the Victorian era. We saw bakers adulterate their flour with alum, plaster of Paris, chalk. All of those things were cheaper than flour. It would increase their profit margin to sell you a loaf of bread where upwards of 30% of the flour was actually chalk or alum. We saw the Austrian wine scandal where basically antifreeze was added to the wine to make it sweeter and to make consumers want to buy it. Again, these things killed people. People were sickened by their food during the Victorian era because we did not have food testing and we did not have consumer protections. Now, eventually in 1906, we got the Wiley Act. The official name is the Pure Food and Drugs Act. It made sure that our food and our pharmaceuticals are safety tested so that there is no adulteration. That what it says on the label is what we're getting. That when we buy a gallon of milk, that things like plaster of Paris and formaldehyde have not been added, and that milk is safe to drink and it is not full of pathogens. Before the Wiley Act, the common phrase was look before you eat. You had to inspect your own food because nothing was trustworthy. You have to understand that part of the reason that the Trump regime is scrubbing websites from not only historical information, but scientific research, the reason that they are dismantling the Department of Ed and they want to keep you ignorant of both history and science is so that it's easier for them to get away with cutting consumer protections. Trump and Elon Musk want to make it easier for corporations to make you sick and to risk your life, so that they can increase their profit margin, so they can get even richer. Billionaires are not our friends. They will fuck us over at the drop of a hat to make more money. They don't really see you or I as human beings. They see us as an opportunity to make money. So they have no problem risking our health and our life and the lives of our children if it makes them richer. A necessary function of government is to protect us from greedy corporations, from people who want to make a buck making us sick, people and businesses who have no ethics. Our taxpayer dollars should be funding consumer protections. The Trump regime wants to make us ignorant of our own history so that we forget why we need these policies, why we need these laws. But do not forget, we have these laws because thousands and thousands of Americans died, mostly children, before we had them. Trump and Musk, they're taking us backward. They're making America less safe. They're risking our health and our lives. They are inflicting suffering. They are making us less safe, less prosperous, all so that billionaires can get richer.